Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guest today is definitely the guest who is, in terms of geography and in terms of emotion, I'm going to say that this guest is the closest that I have. It's my brother, Matt. Matt Wood is here at the octagonal table chatting with the podcast today. That was totally professional.
It's great.
Right?
I'm brother Matt.
I said octagonal. So
Yeah.
it is funny how many people will ask me if you are a monk.
Because like brother Matt.
When I say brother Matt, the problem is I know multiple Matts in my life. And even beyond that, when I'm talking to someone who may not necessarily remember what my brother's name is, I'll often say like, probably brother Matt will help me build that swing set or whatever, and it is funny how but
it's not a bad thing to, kind of preface that monks are cool. I mean,
I think it'd be okay if someone mistook you for a monk,
And if I didn't like, being married so much, maybe I would be a monk.
I mean, you enjoy the brewing aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
You could be either one of the casket making monks for Thacker, or you could be one of the brewing monks,
or both. I mean, monks, they're not, they're limited in many ways, but I'm sure you could do both of those.
Our mother was a nun. We can. I mean,
not
didn't take her
fully,
final vows
because that would be like scandalous.
That's true. That's true. No, our mother went to the convent and lived in the convent for many years with the intention at the beginning of becoming a nun, and decided against it. So here we are.
Yep.
If you had turned into a monk, then that's following in the family footsteps.
Sure.
So something.
What's on your mind, Peter?
I'm gonna tell you what's bothering me. You scuba dive.
Yeah.
I can't snorkel.
Oh yeah.
I'm terrible. I have a hard time putting my face underwater and breathing.
Did we both have this same idea for an episode?
No. We'll see.
Oh man. So okay. I thought episode talking about Peter's gag reflex. I was like, boom.
No. That was not what I was thinking about. Okay. Although it is true. I mean,
let's go in there.
I'm dreadful at swallowing pills, and I can't breathe underwater because
I think they're related.
Yeah. No, what I was you've done a lot more, scuba diving and snorkeling, and something that I think is fascinating that I've talked about is that when you go to a dive shop,
right,
you see so many overlaps between the guys who hang out at a dive shop and the guys who hang out at a magic shop.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there are the same archetypes.
Yep.
And so first of all, for our listener here, it's important to know that 95% of magicians are hobbyists.
Yeah.
Maybe higher than that. I mean, the point is the people, if you've ever heard of or seen a magic
shop. The other 5%
shop,
are statisticians.
Right? Well, yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't know how the numbers are, but I definitely know that let's just say the vast majority of the people.
Yeah. Or I could say,
tricks.
folks that land in a magic shop are hobbyists. That's not a pro shop.
Yeah,
necessarily.
Sure. Right.
Although it is the assumption is that it kind of is.
Well, yeah. And I think there's it depends on how the shop has sort of framed itself. Like definitely if there's a shop that's on a touristy boardwalk, it's going to be less likely to be a pro shop. Not that they don't sell some professional props, but the sort of ones that you'll pop into in Las Vegas are definitely more catering to tourists. You know? But still, by and large, the people who come into magic stores, much like the people who go into a scuba gear store, are not making their living by the tools that are being sold in the shop.
Yeah.
And so I was just sort of curious if you wanted to talk a little bit more about those sort of those like archetypes that you notice, the overlaps of.
No, I think and we've talked about this before that but generally like in any hobby that some people make money at, that requires specialized equipment, you're going to end up with these shops that specialize in selling that equipment.
Sure.
Most of the folks there, different from I'm going to compare it to like going to a hardware store,
Right.
where like, there's people at a hardware store that are professionals, professional carpenters and tradesmen,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of homeowners there.
Yeah.
Maybe a similar percentage, but it doesn't matter because it's not like the people that are there don't necessarily identify. That's not part of their identity.
Sure.
They're
right.
like really, whether you're a professional tradesman or you're a homeowner,
Right.
you're still just trying to fix something in a house, whether it's yours or not.
Yeah.
But like
yeah.
being at a dive shop or a magic shop or a gun shop or whatever, an art shop, like that is going to be a key part of somebody's identity.
Right.
What's really crazy is writers shops.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I was thinking about writers when you're talking
Yeah,
about that. Like,
yeah.
do you make your money? Do you make your living at it, or
Right,
just
right.
is that how you identify?
And like
as,
you've got 95% of people that are coming through looking for stationery to give to their writer friend for Christmas, or they're looking for bullet journal stuff, but
Sure.
and then so here's the easiest archetype to point out is the true professional.
Okay.
And this is like the hero of the shop. Like, right. This is the person who's made it, so this is a technical diver.
Okay.
Who's, they're salvaging wrecks and they're, and they come into the shop and so that's your 5%.
But and what kind of kit, what kind of gear are they buying? Like, what are they spending their money on? Are they spending the most?
So like they might be doing some expendables.
Okay.
They're probably doing some like no, they're definitely not spending the most.
Right.
Because they're in the business, like they're trying to make money
Okay.
and be efficient with their gear.
Right.
So it's not they also probably get comped a lot of stuff.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because they're the hero. Like
Sure.
I don't know if this is true in magic shops, but like, oh yeah, so and so who's like a tech diver who does salvage. He's running the Orca Mark III dive computer. Maybe you should buy one of those. Like, yeah, I need one of those. If like the pro that I know is using one, but actually, we just gave him that as the dive shop, so we can sell a couple more of them.
Sure. Okay. All right. Yeah.
I'm sure that happens.
So, certainly in terms of like product. Let me give you my product for free, and then you write a review about it. And now it's like, well, so and so is using it, but they didn't buy it there.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then then I think you've got your like, your collector.
Okay.
So that's like in the dive shop analogy, that's a guy that's like got to have the latest set of gauges. The latest second stage regulator, but doesn't actually dive.
Right.
And maybe they did once and they had to check out. Maybe they've done it a time or two, but they're really just into the gear. And I think that happens less in dive shops and more in magic shops where you've got guys that really just want to collect stuff. And where it happens the most is in gun shops.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Like,
yep.
Now in gun shops, I don't think there's the professional archetype in gun shops because you're not, thankfully in our society, there's not too many professionals that have to use guns regularly. Right.
Exactly.
But like, there are a lot of collectors that are just like, Smith & Wesson came out with a new something. Yeah. I'm
going to get it.
I need it.
Right.
I can buy one a week. So, whatever.
Sure.
In this state. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
but a magic shop's same thing. Like,
sure.
You I'm sure you know more of that. Like people come in and say, "What's new?"
Yeah,
I got to have it. Like,
and that's what's always funny is like,
what are you performing? Like,
family and friends.
Thinking about doing my nephew's birthday in 2 years.
Right.
Like if they ask, it's.
Well, it also assumes that what's new is better. Like, so you're telling me you already own every trick that's ever been put out? Like, but that's what's always so frustrating. Anytime I've spent time behind the counter at a magic shop is that if I was working at Michael's and somebody came in and said, so what's new in the paint department? And I could be like, well, we got some more titanium white acrylic in, but what are you painting? Like,
more yellow.
I don't no, yeah, just give me the latest stuff and I'll sort of cobble together a piece. And that just seems awful from an artistic perspective. But that's exactly like folks want to come in and they want to, what's the latest trick? Yeah. But what I have to remind myself of is that there's a great, Albert Goshman was a magician from 2 generations ago, I'll say. And he sort of popularized and mass produced sponge balls and sponge rabbits. But anyway, his quote, one of his quotes is that amateurs do different tricks for the same people and professionals do the same tricks for different people.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot because it is true where I've been able to come up with, I mean, I've got a bunch of tricks, don't get me wrong, but the core show that I'm doing, I have the ability to do it over and over again for different people. And so I really get a chance to polish it and hone it and try it out a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Whereas for an amateur, you are going to show it to your golfing buddies or your family and friends, or maybe you do that annual show at the church picnic that you're sort of, and every year, again, because you're doing it for the same people, you want to make sure that you're bringing back some different stuff.
Right.
But it is a different, and like, I think that's different. That's what interests me about the dive shop thing is that on the one hand, a professional magician will spare no expense if it is like, if it's a durability kind of a thing. Sure. Like this prop is going to last forever and I want to stop replacing it. So I'm going to buy this expensive version.
Right.
But if it's something like electronic or gadgety or too many moving pieces on it, that's the kind of thing that an amateur will fall in love with.
Right.
But a professional will sort of see all the flaws in
this thing's going to wear out 20 times and make me look like an idiot.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, hopefully, I mean, I think the stakes are a little bit lower at an amateur magic show versus an amateur scuba dive.
Yeah. No, see the divers are like, yeah, I mean, if you're rich enough to think this way, you're like, oh, my life is on the line. I must have the most advanced gear. And like, the guys that I learned to dive from, they were all about kind of like roughing it. Like, it was like badass to like have your gear break. That was just that was cool. Because you can get it. You know what to do. Like, it wasn't that was definitely a very different diving culture than what is profitable for a dive shop. Because it's like, if your gear breaks, no big deal. Just fix it while you're down there. You can hold your breath for a long time. Like that. I was like,
that sounds. That's I see. I mean, because
you don't
that's
need all that fancy stuff,
right?
Well,
I mean, like, the other joke is that like the more professional of a magician you become, the more your show comes from Home Depot and Staples, and less from a magic shop. And it's because magic tricks will come and go, and if it's something that is a staple of your act, you want to be able to get it for forever. Has
Zucchini found a? I want to build him a squirting toilet. That like will last forever. I want to build him one that's just like crazy.
I do think that's
he used to go through the. I mean, that was like keeping Barry and Susie in business for.
No, it's, I mean, the number, so the great Zucchini, famously, does a gag with a little plastic toilet where when you lift the lid, it squirts water out of it. But the problem is that he's using it, at a professional level. And it's a thing that's designed to be a child's toy or a gag gift. Right. And so it was not manufactured to those standards.
It's got like 100 use life.
Right. And which is fine.
He'll burn through that in a month.
No, easily. I think it's interesting. One, and also sort of talking more about like technology and magic. I'm sort of torn, and I'd be curious to sort of see where your thoughts land. As I find myself as a hobbyist really enjoying behind the scenes technical wizardry. So if there is a really cool, if the secret is awesome to me, if I really enjoy like the secret of how this thing works, sometimes that will blind my judgment in terms of, does an audience want to see this because they don't know what the secret is. And so more and more what I've been trying to do in my shows is use technology as window dressing. So if technology is making sound effects or music cues happen, it's making smoke come out of places, it's making, something fall over for a laugh, but it's not like the underlying technical method of making a thing work,
Right.
which sort of ties into the whole dive thing where it's like, okay, if your equipment is failing you, you need to still be able to do your job. Or in the case of diving, to survive.
Yeah.
And so you can't just be relying on that, know. But I've sort of played with it through the years.
Fancy dive gear will, should, embellish the experience, but it should not be a make or break. It shouldn't be like, oh man, I didn't have the latest dive computer, so I just can't dive today.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it should just be saying like, well, I could spend a little bit more time down because I have a later dive computer that factors in this other thing that lets me.
What's a dive computer?
Oh, so that's like telling. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I genuinely
for you
don't
and
know.
So it's doing all the math that you would normally rely on, like tables. It's telling you how long you can stay down.
Okay.
Which is a function of like how much nitrogen is being absorbed into your blood at pressure.
Okay.
When you're at the bottom, because you're breathing like pressurized air at the
Sure.
the lower you go. So the lower you go, the less time. Well, not the less time you can stay, but the more time you have to take to come back up.
Right.
So that
Okay.
you don't get nitrogen bubbles through your heart.
Right. Okay.
And get them in. You get the bends, which
Sure.
is where you would get nitrogen that's like bubbles in your joints.
Okay.
So that's if you surface too fast. So your dive computer kind of tells you like, all right, you've been at this depth for this long.
Right.
That means that you've got to, when you do your ascent, it's got to take this long.
Right. Okay.
I mean, and it can be a long time.
Right.
That you've got to decompress as you come back up slowly. So
and it's measuring various things and constantly updating.
Constantly updating.
Okay,
So
I
like
see.
the best dive computers will, they're measuring like your air consumption.
Right.
And,
Sure.
And your depth. So it'll say like, hey, it's saying it's time to turn around.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure. All right. That
now
makes
it's
sense.
time to turn around. And the better your dive computer is at factoring in all of those things.
Right. Okay.
The more time you get to spend at the bottom. Which when you're like paying for diving,
Yeah.
you go out on a dive boat and you're there for however many tanks of air, and
Sure.
if you come back up with a tank that's half full. You kind of wasted it.
Yeah, sure.
You don't get to go back down. I mean,
Fair.
you don't get to use a half a tank. So,
Yep. Okay.
that's expanding your experience. So,
Cool. Okay. Sorry, I derailed you. Asking what a dive computer is. But the point is that if you were talking about how the better the dive computer is, in theory, it's
but
but it's not required.
You also don't need a dive computer to dive because you can. I mean, you have something that. You have a gauge that tells you how much air you have.
Sure.
And maybe you have a clock. Or a dive watch that tells
factor
you
that in.
Yeah, like here's how long I've spent here, and here's how deep I am.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Well, the other thing that I've found, and I feel like this is probably true for diving as well as magic, but like there's something about a technological failure that's very binary, pun intended, where it's either it works fine or it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
And yet if I'm doing like a sleight of hand move, there's this whole continuum of it's either perfection all the way down to everyone in the audience saw what I did, right? But then there's this whole gray area in the middle where like, okay, I was having a bad day and my hands were clammy and
4 minutes and 14 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Whatever, and the point, but it got by most people.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I was able to sort of overcome whatever the obstacle was.
Yeah. It wasn't a hard fail. I mean, it wasn't a definitive failure. But
normally when you're using technology to try to pull off a magical happening,
right.
It seems like if it does fail, it is just a complete catastrophic.
To make your binary,
that doesn't work.
Switch is either open or closed. Like that's
Which is another back to like if you get down to the bottom and your dive computer is dead,
right.
then it doesn't doesn't do you any good, and
Sure,
you'll
sure.
wish that you had other low tech
or yeah,
instruments, you know.
you wish that you had, planned it better, you know,
Right,
like,
right. Yeah.
So,
Well, and so the other related overextended metaphor that I'm curious about, you were talking to me about ninja magic.
oh yeah, yeah,
And this is something where I've never done any martial arts, and you have for years,
Yep.
even as a child, but you know. And so I'm just sort of curious where you see sort of the overlaps or the obvious differences or whatever between those art or the disciplines. you
yeah.
know?
So, I mean, the most obvious one is the concept of misdirection.
Okay, sure.
So like there's a lot of techniques certainly in my martial art that are dealing with distracting someone, making someone look away from what's coming.
Sure, sure.
And then there's also extending on that, like timing misdirection, like doing something in an order because you know that it will cause them to act in a certain way, and then in a predictable sort of way.
Right.
So you move in a way that you get someone to follow you, and you know that they're going to follow you, so that you can put the move on them later. So, there's a lot of overlaps there.
Interesting.
And I mean, and then the most obvious overlap of like ninjas using smoke bombs and
Right.
like
Yeah.
all that fun stuff. I mean that you saw Batman Begins.
Yeah.
It's all true.
It's all yeah.
They were magicians.
Yeah.
Like so where does the line of like ninja and magician gets blurred? I mean magicians aren't usually doing physical stuff, but like
Right.
ninjas are also not trying to do too much physical stuff, right? Like you're way better off if you can just like outwit your opponent.
Yeah.
Than
true.
if you have to like, they might be stronger than you.
Right,
So you can't
right.
reliably overpower an opponent. You've got to,
That's interesting,
outsmart them and use deception.
Well, and a lot, I mean, it's just sort of, we're kind of just talking about social engineering, right? Like figuring out, steering people. I mean, a lot of both, I think about spying as well, when I sort of talk about the overlaps between magic and espionage, and like often it has to do with the illusion of a free choice where I thought that I wanted to follow that person down that alleyway, but actually that person chose that alleyway because they know that it will give an opportunity to attack them from behind, or because that's where the spy is going to lose the tail or whatever that might be. So it is interesting how that sort of is really just sort of about getting people to do what you want, but believe it was their idea.
People that are far more advanced than me in our martial art are really good at like baiting attacks.
Okay.
So you're sparring, you're fighting someone, and they are getting you to attack them in the way that they want,
right?
Because they know what to do. They have a perfect technique for that, and
nice.
And if you are able to bait that and know what's coming,
right? That's
so
cool.
It's definitely the same mentality. So
right. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, there's always going to be those sort of overlaps.
We're gonna get you out to the dojo someday to do
a
little.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Well, this is great, and that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast of the impossible. If you want to buy Matt a virtual drink and you're on Venmo, you can go to Matt's Wood, MATTSWOOD, and brother Matt will get a something from you. And then for me, if you want to give me money, that's fine. But more importantly, if you want to check out a public show or social media and all my special projects that I've got brewing, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood.
I'm Matt Wood.
Thanks for coming. See ya.